So I know that one of our panelists is actually on a very tight deadline, and I do not want him to miss his flight. So I'm going to direct my first question at Webster Mfebe of the South African Forum of Civil Engineering Contractors. Webster, you represent the largest industry of contractors and construction businesses on the continent. It's often suggested that contractors and developers are reluctant to invest their expertise, resources, and innovations into developing major government-led projects due to a lack of certainty around the financial risks associated with tender processes and the like. What approaches and recommendations would you propose that will crowd in private sector investment and contractors and developers, and more freely in the development phase of major public sector projects to alleviate budgetary demands of governments?
Thank you very much. Firstly, just to put context into my inputs, SAFSEC, the South African Forum of Civil Engineering Contractors, agrees with the view of the leaders of the AU and the leaders of the South African government that infrastructure development should not only leave behind physical infrastructure, but should also contribute to national developmental goals, to economic growth, to job creation, to skills development. And that is what shapes our thinking in whatever we do. Of course, the issues of reluctance on investment of expertise, resources, and innovation. There are a number of factors currently influencing the domestic construction sector's confidence to invest expertise, resources, and innovation. A lack of work in the domestic construction sector, delays in infrastructure expenditure, a particularly low profitability in the industry, poor tendering environment, tough labor negotiations, lack of prompt payments for work completed by contractors. Some of these factors influence the decisions of many contractors to expand into Africa and elsewhere. And if that situation maintains, we run a risk similar to other African countries where the domestic construction capacity of the industry is dissipated, and foreigners, nothing wrong with foreigners, they come and do the work that is supposed to be done by the construction industry. The lack of certainty is not only about the lack or delay of expenditure in government infrastructure, but also speak to questions of lack of alignment between tenders put out and actual tenders awarded. 2015, for an example, saw a 40% decline in the conversion ratio, that is, tenders that have been converted to actual projects. And you can imagine that 40% is very huge. Contractors go an extra mile to put all their resources to prepare for these tenders. And it also not only robs the contractors, but also the bona fide suppliers to the industry if that is not taken into consideration. However, there's a reason to be optimistic because the infrastructure programs that have been announced by the Minister of Finance in the recent budget, and also the successes such as the energy renewal program, give confidence, and I must say to investors to come and invest in this country. Private sector involvement has ensured that we spend 194 billion rand in this renewable energy initiative. 27%, which represent 53.4 billion rands, is foreign direct investment, which shows that government alone cannot be able to deal with these factors. Included in that are actual challenges which call for external investment to join hands with government. For an example, if you look at the maintenance backlog without even considering what has to be done, if you look at the road network, for an example, in terms of the Sunral September 2014 report, there is a poor road network of about 11,000 kilometers, which would need about 20 to 30 billion rands to deal with. If you look at energy, for an example, we are talking between 50 and 70 billion rands that you need to do the maintenance backlog. When you talk about water and sanitation, you are talking about a gap of 60 billion rand. Over a period of 10 years, you are talking about 600 billion rand. That calls for space for private sector participation to deal with those issues. And I'm saying that we have to be bullish about the outlook of our economy, especially Moody's forecast of 1.7 growth next year, and the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank 1.7 and IMF of 1.2% outlook in terms of growth. And therefore, if we work together and we deal with the problems of regulatory certainty, roll out the infrastructure, talk about delivery mechanisms of projects like build and design, lump sum, framework agreements to deliver projects in a manner that will involve the contractors. Our issue in South Africa, which we keep on talking about, is that contractors are involved at the later stage of the process of project delivery. We have agreed as a country to say that the way we look at project, we must look at it infrastructure as a three-stage process: planning, implementation, and maintenance. You've heard I've talked about backlogs in maintenance. That was left out in the previous thinking, in the previous paradigm. So we need to look at these things as a continuum in order to deliver all these. That is my input so far, and I've indicated also I've got very serious flight problems, and I will remain here so far.
Thank you, Webster. Thank you for your commentary, and given that you have time constraints, before we go to the other panelists, does anyone have any specific questions for Webster that he can address before leaving?
And a commitment to invest, I would welcome.
Okay, with that, should we move? We can move on to the other panelists, and you should feel free to excuse yourself if you need to leave early. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.